I never imagined I would be writing this, but life has a way of unraveling when you least expect it. My wife and I had been married for 8 years, and I thought we had a solid relationship. We shared laughs, dreams, and plans for the future. But everything I thought I knew came crashing down in the span of a single week. It started with subtle changes. She began staying late at work more often. Her phone was always face down, and she seemed distant. At first, I chalked it up to stress. Everyone goes through rough patches, right? But the gut feeling that something was off wouldn't go away. One night, while she was in the shower, I noticed her phone buzzing on the counter. Curiosity got the better of me. The message preview was from someone saved as Jordan and read, asterisk, last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you. Asterisk, my heart sank. I knew I shouldn't invade her privacy, but in that moment, the need for answers outweighed my guilt. Scrolling through the messages revealed what I had feared. They had been seeing each other for months. The texts were explicit, detailing rendezvous and emotions I thought were reserved for us. I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me. I didn't confront her immediately. I needed time to process, to decide what I wanted to say. Over the next couple of days, I tried to act normal, but every interaction felt strained. I looked at her and wondered how she could sit across from me, smiling, while carrying on this betrayal. Finally, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. That Friday night after dinner, I told her we needed to talk. Her face immediately changed. She must have sensed that I knew. I started with, "Is there something you need to tell me?" She denied it, but her voice wavered. I told her I'd seen the messages. Her defenses crumbled. She admitted to the affair, claiming it just happened and that she didn't mean to hurt me. She said she felt neglected, unappreciated, and had found comfort in someone else. Her words hit me like a sledgehammer. Neglected? I had always done everything I could to make her feel loved. I worked hard to provide for us, planned dates, and supported her dreams. I asked her if she even wanted to save our marriage, but her silence spoke volumes. That night, I packed a bag and left. I stayed with a friend, trying to piece together what to do next. The pain was unbearable, but so was the thought of staying with someone who had so little regard for our relationship. Over the next few weeks, we had several difficult conversations. She apologized repeatedly and said she wanted to work things out, but trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to rebuild. I couldn't shake the images of her betrayal or the lies she told to cover it up. In the end, we decided to separate. It wasn't an easy decision, but it felt like the only one. Looking back, I realize how important it is to communicate, to address problems before they fester. But no matter how hard one person tries, a marriage can't survive if both people aren't fully committed. This experience changed me in ways I'm still coming to terms with. Betrayal has a way of leaving scars, but it also teaches you about resilience. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know I deserve honesty and respect, and I'll never settle for less again. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding myself. At first, the days felt like a blur. The pain of losing not only my wife, but also the life we had built together was suffocating. Simple things, like walking past our favorite coffee shop or hearing a song we loved, could bring me to the verge of tears. But over time, I realized I couldn't let her betrayal define me. I started therapy, which turned out to be one of the best decisions I ever made. Talking to someone who could help me process my feelings allowed me to let go of the guilt and self-blame I had been carrying. I learned that her affair wasn't a reflection of my worth, but rather her inability to communicate or address her own issues. I also reconnected with friends I had unintentionally drifted away from during my marriage. They rallied around me, offering support and reminders of who I was outside of being a husband. Slowly but surely, I began to rediscover myself. I picked up hobbies I had abandoned, started working out more consistently, and even took a solo trip to clear my head. Meanwhile, my ex-wife tried to maintain contact. At first, it was under the guise of checking in or seeing how I was doing, but I could tell she was grappling with the consequences of her choices. She admitted that her relationship with Jordan had fizzled out quickly after I left. Apparently, what seemed exciting and forbidden lost its luster when faced with real-world responsibilities. While part of me found satisfaction in her regrets, I refused to let it pull me back in. I knew that reconciling would only reopen wounds I was working hard to heal. So I set boundaries and minimized contact, speaking only when necessary to finalize our separation. As time passed, the pain softened into a dull ache rather than the sharp sting it once was. I began to think about what I wanted moving forward. I knew trust would be a hurdle in any future relationship, but I also realized that I couldn't let fear hold me back from finding happiness again. One day, as I was running errands, I bumped into someone unexpected, a woman I had known in college. We started chatting, and before I knew it, we were exchanging numbers. It felt natural, not forced or rushed. While I wasn't sure if I was ready to date seriously, it reminded me that there's still a world of possibilities out there. Reflecting on everything, I see now that my wife's affair, while devastating, was a turning point in my life. It forced me to reevaluate my priorities and strengthen my sense of self. I'm not the same person I was before, and in many ways, I'm grateful for that. Sometimes, the most painful experiences teach us the most about resilience, forgiveness, and self-worth. I don't know where my journey will lead, but for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful, and that's a start. Months turned into a year, and slowly, I found myself embracing the freedom that came with starting over. It wasn't easy, and there were still moments when memories of my marriage crept in unexpectedly. But each day brought a small victory, whether it was smiling without forcing it, laughing with friends, or realizing I hadn't thought about her betrayal for hours at a time. The woman I reconnected with from college, Emily, and I started spending more time together. At first, I was hesitant to let her in, worried that my baggage would overwhelm her or sabotage anything before it even began. But Emily was patient, understanding in a way that felt refreshing and safe. She never pushed me to talk about my past, but when I did, she listened without judgment. Our relationship grew slowly, built on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. For the first time, I realized how much I had been missing in my marriage. Open communication, emotional intimacy, and a genuine sense of partnership. It was a stark contrast to the lies and secrecy I had endured before. Still, I wasn't naive. I knew trust wouldn't come easily, and I made sure to be transparent about my fears. Emily reassured me that she was in this for the long haul, but she also emphasized that healing was a process, not something that could be rushed. Her kindness gave me the space to move forward at my own pace. As I began to rebuild my confidence in relationships, I also achieved personal milestones. I received a promotion at work, something I had been striving for over the past few years. With that accomplishment, I finally felt like I was back in control of my life, no longer defined by the pain of my past. One day, as I was sorting through old boxes, I came across my wedding album. For a moment, I froze, unsure whether I should open it or throw it away. In the end, I decided to look through the photos. Surprisingly, it didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. Instead, it felt like looking at someone else's life, a chapter that had closed. I realized then that forgiveness isn't about excusing someone's behavior. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of anger and resentment. I wouldn't forget what my ex-wife had done, but I could let go of the bitterness that had been holding me back. When Emily and I eventually had a conversation about our future, I found myself smiling at the thought of what lay ahead. The pain of my past hadn't disappeared entirely, but it no longer dictated my choices or overshadowed my happiness. Looking back now, I see the affair as a breaking point that forced me to confront hard truths about myself and my relationship. It taught me the value of self-respect, the importance of boundaries, and the resilience I didn't know I possessed. The journey hasn't been easy, but it's led me to a place where I can genuinely say I'm happy again. Life isn't perfect, but it's real. And for the first time in a long time, it feels like it's truly mine as Emily and I grew closer. I began to see how much I had changed for the better. The experience of my wife's betrayal had shaken me to my core, but it had also forced me to mature in ways I hadn't anticipated. I was more self-aware, more vocal about my needs, and more willing to recognize the red flags I had once ignored. Our relationship wasn't perfect. No relationship is. But it was built on a level of honesty I hadn't experienced before. Whenever doubts or insecurities crept in, Emily encouraged me to talk about them rather than letting them fester. Slowly, I began to trust again, not just in her, but in myself and my ability to choose a partner who genuinely cared for me. One evening, as we sat on her balcony watching the sunset, Emily turned to me and said something that stuck with me. "You've been through hell, but look at you now. You didn't let it break you. You built something new from the ashes." Her words hit me deeply. For the first time, I felt proud of how far I'd come. I wasn't the person I was before my marriage, but that was okay. I had grown stronger, wiser, and more resilient. In time, I decided to take another step forward. I reconnected with my ex-wife, not out of a desire to rekindle anything, but to find closure. We met for coffee, and while the conversation was tense at first, it eventually became honest and reflective. She admitted that she had been struggling with her own insecurities during our marriage, but instead of addressing them, she sought validation in the wrong place. Hearing her admit her faults didn't erase the pain she caused, but it gave me a sense of peace. I realized I didn't need her apology to move on. I had already done that on my own, but it felt good to hear her acknowledge her mistakes. After that meeting, I felt like a chapter of my life had truly closed. I no longer carried the weight of anger or regret. Instead, I focused entirely on the life I was building with Emily and the goals I had for myself. Eventually, Emily and I decided to move in together. It was a big step, but one that felt right. Our home became a place of love, laughter, and mutual support, a stark contrast to the tension and secrets that had once consumed my marriage. Looking back, I can honestly say that my wife's affair, while devastating, was a turning point that ultimately led me to a better life. It forced me to reevaluate my priorities, redefine my values, and rediscover who I was outside of being a husband. Life is unpredictable, and it doesn't always go the way we plan. But sometimes, the most painful endings lead to the most beautiful beginnings. And for that, I'm grateful.